Hey everyone, Micah today with some thoughts here with Jurassic World Evolution 2. I did a video on the first game last week, and I was generally pretty positive about it. However, the sequel here has been a little mixed. So, I've spent, I'd say, about 2 hours total. Just a little bit over an hour on the campaign here, which is already 57% complete. And then the rest of that time I spent playing a little bit in the sandbox modes and whatnot. I didn't really save when I was playing in those modes, so yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, we'll go ahead and continue the campaign for a little bit. We'll talk about the games and compare them, you know, to the one that the video I did last week on the first one, and then we'll kind of go from there. So first things first, I'm just going to quickly point out a little bit of mouse clicks, keyboard clicks, background noise potentially. This game doesn't support, or this game doesn't have an FPS cap, and since I'm running RTX voice on a GTX card, if my GPU usage goes too high up, it gets really choppy. So fortunately I can't use any voice filtering in this video, so you'll hear a little bit of that background noise. Also, I'll point out too that this is a GTX card limitation for running that. Even an external frame rate cap isn't going to help. Anyways, so this is the third of 5 campaign missions. I would argue these are more tutorials than actual campaign missions. While there is some story and some neat stuff that happens, set pieces, whatever. Fundamentally, this is just a way to get you, into the game. Kind of teach you all the mechanics and whatnot. So we were researching medication there to deal with these diseases that these dinosaurs have. And actually... they still see? Ah, no. For a fraction of a second there, you would have seen the dart in its leg, because the mobile vet unit here is now treating them for whatever disease they've had. So, this game is interesting compared to the previous game, just Jurassic World Evolution, in that they've simplified a lot of mechanics. They've added a couple more mechanics, but they also massively simplified a lot of the existing ones. And so, in some ways, this is kind of a easier game, I guess. There's a little bit less to deal with. There's a little bit of less, busy work. But at the same time, they have made it a much nicer game to play. So yeah. Fortunately, these guys are panicking a little bit because they're being shot at by a dude sitting in a vehicle. So, not great, but we've cured them from their disease, so that's kind of the important part here. So with that done, we are looking to just increase our asset rating, so we'll need to get some more dinosaurs. And so let's take a look at that.
Understood. My teams are standing by.
So I've got a couple options here.
Plenty of targets to bring in.
Assets.
5. What are these guys? Oh, okay. So I know these guys, they're herbivores. They might work with this enclosure. So I guess let's give that a look. So what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to try and reuse the same enclosure for those dinosaurs, and so I'll make it a little bit bigger, just because the requirements might be a bit of a problem. So let's make this a larger enclosure. Come on. Oh. Make this a bit bigger. Gotta wait for this fence to finish building. While that's happening, we could put a viewing facility here. Here, maybe? Yeah, that should give us a decent amount of coverage. Let's add 2 viewing facilities. You can see there's a line going to these backup generators, so I don't have dedicated power plants on this map just yet, so we are depending on backup generators instead, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. So we'll go ahead and connect that up, then we'll do the same thing up here. So a lot of the mechanics, if you've played the first game or you saw the video from last week, a lot of the stuff is more or less the same. They haven't changed a formula that works. However, some of the things they've done, I'm not too sure about it. You know, the thing I liked about the first one was that the campaign was, yeah, it was kind of an open sandbox, but also it worked out pretty well, right? It was an open sandbox with fairly clear objectives as to what you had to do. So for me, that game worked out pretty well. You know, one of the things I'm not crazy about when it comes to open sandbox style games is, you know, to a certain extent, I'm not crazy about just having this endless game. You know, I have a huge backlog of games. I talk about that in a lot of videos. And so to me, just starting something that's like, yeah, it's just a thing to have fun with, it doesn't interest me that much. There's a time and place for it. I definitely appreciate that those games exist, but I'm kind of at a point where that's not what I'm looking for. And so the first game being kind of an open sandbox experience, but with clear missions and objectives that you can reach, was pretty fun, because it gave you a direction to go down, and it gave you goals to do. And eventually, when I'd finish it, I felt like, hey, the game's done, you know, I can move on. But if you wanted to keep playing, there's nothing stopping you from doing that either. And so, because of how that game worked, I did find myself going to some older islands where I might have completed everything, just as a way to speed up research, because I have a lot of money, send out expeditions to find new dinosaurs, that kind of stuff. And so I still wound up replaying stuff in a way where maybe with the normal just sandbox experience, I wouldn't necessarily do that as much. Yeah, to kind of give you an idea of how that works out, the way the previous game worked was you had a cluster of islands, 5 islands, or technically 6, that was a sandbox one. But yeah, you had this cluster of 5 islands, you'd start on the first one. A lot of the missions they would give at you were kind of a tutorial setup, you know, learning the game, learning the mechanics, and then they would teach you a lot of the basics. Once you kind of finished all of that, then you would really focus on increasing your reputation with each of the 3 different advisors. As you can increase reputation, they give you mission timelines or they give you a sequence of missions back to back, and you're trying to deal with a certain potentially difficult situation or a challenge. And so once you complete that, you would generally get some sort of unlock, whether it's new buildings, new enclosure stuff, new entertainment things for guests, you know, a lot of different options. And that's kind of how the progression worked. It worked pretty well. I found it to be a pretty smart way to go about it. Yeah, it's pretty good. You know, I liked how they did that game. I think it holds up pretty well. And beyond that, I don't really have any major complaints. I like the fact that some of the stuff would follow you between the islands, and so, for instance, any research and development and upgrades and whatever, that would follow you. That would be unlocked globally for the campaign. And so you would wind up having this neat situation where you can go back and say, hey, I've done a couple of things here. You know, I've gone pretty far on this particular island. I'm maybe at the point where, I don't know, I have to, how can I say this? Yeah, like you'd reach a point where maybe the challenge would take you a while, so you'd say, oh, okay, let's just go to the new island, right? And so just going to the new island means that, hey, you've got a lot more unlocks available, because that's just kind of how the game works. And so that was a pretty cool setup and a way to progress through that game, because then it gave you incentives to move forward, because by going to the new island you could establish more another expedition facility that would unlock more regions, more fossils. You can build another research center, which will unlock more research options. And each of the islands, newer islands, would have their own challenges. And overall, it was a really cool system. It worked out pretty well. I found it pretty enjoyable. And, oh. This guy's attacking. This guy's attacking the vehicle, and he got, put to sleep pretty quickly. That's cool. I guess I'll have to build another ranger outpost out here, because these guys are kind of outside the view. So yeah, the reason I'm bringing all those points up is that with this game, they kind of stripped out a lot of that stuff. You know, the way this game works is fairly different. It's more streamlined in a lot of ways, which is not a bad thing. It's, you know, you don't have a bunch of different guest facilities anymore. You only really have one guest facility with a bunch of upgrades, so you can deal with certain demands that people have. So, not necessarily a bad thing, but it is different, right? It's a different way of kind of going about it. So that's been it's been interesting, I suppose. You can see here, because this guy hasn't moved around a lot, he doesn't know that there's ground leaf necessarily out here. Now that he's moving a little bit, you might see a little bit. Let's just add a little bit there, just to get his needs up. Yeah, like, I do appreciate some of the changes from this game. That's what makes it a little bit frustrating for me, is that you have a lot of changes between these games, but I don't know, you have so many good quality of life choices, but yet they just kind of went about it and said, oh, it's a sandbox, so play it like a sandbox game, which, yeah, I could, but maybe it would have been better if they did a little bit more than just that, you know? Let's see, what else can we get? We need to find more dinosaurs. I have to be a little bit careful, because I'm not too sure what's hostile to each other. I'm not too sure what would be very compatible. I know this guy wants fish. Maybe let's do that. We'll get another carnivore in that wants fish. So building stuff, pretty straightforward. You can see there's a little bit of snapping to help you out with your angles and stuff if you really care about it. At the end of the day, it's not critical to have stuff at angles and whatever. It works. And then this little outpost dealy can help you out. Might need another ranger team. Okay, we're out of power. Actually, are we out of power, or we're just... No, we're good. Oh yeah, this power plant's not even working. Cool. Alright, so we'll send out an expedition. We'll get those... Baranox? Oh, I don't know if that's how you say it. I'll pretend it is. We'll do these again. Duration's low. And I'll probably have to get those scientists to rest, and that'll be that. Since I know this particular dinosaur eats fish and they want a lot of water, we'll give them a nice chunk of water here. And we'll put fish so they can eat. And then... yeah, I'll not spoil the other bit. We'll do it when they come in. But yeah, I don't know. As a purely sandbox game, I wasn't crazy about the first game, and I'm not crazy about this one either. Ultimately, building a park is... yeah, it is what it is. I would like to have more of a challenge, and so just building a park for the sake of building a park is not necessarily something I find very enjoyable. Now, whether or not this game is good or bad at that, it is a little bit of a personal preference. I will say that this game, I think, is okay, right? It's got enough tools to kind of tell you what's missing, so I don't have any shelter here. Let's give people a shelter, I guess. Because dinosaurs escape. Well, it's a good idea to have a shelter. But yeah, you can look at, there's no crowding on the paths here. Peel, visibility. You can see what my ranger patrols would cover. So this dinosaur was maybe out of range at one point. Definitely isn't now. Yeah, you got a lot of basic mechanics like that. There's not a whole lot going on, right? You don't have to deal with very much. If you're playing a sandbox map, you also have guest stuff to worry about, but we don't have guests here in the campaign, so we don't even have to worry about getting them fed, giving them washrooms, satisfying their shopping, entertainment experiences. Like, we don't have any of that to deal with. But like I said, in this game, those things are just all diluted down into one building, and you put some upgrades. So in some ways, it is better. It is a bit better dealing it with that way. Because before, having to do multiple buildings, you didn't have much space to build in. It did make it a little tough. If we actually zoom out, you can see here, these maps are not huge. You can fit a couple enclosures, but not too many. The campaign maps are a little bit smaller. So if you actually want to play sandbox, there's a little bit more room than this. And that's kind of how the first game was as well. So, I don't know, mechanically they're both very similar. There's really not a ton of differences between the two. They just did stuff like the feeders. Well, the feeders now feed dinosaurs when they need it. The previous game, you had to spend a decent chunk of time just kind of guessing, I guess, which, I don't know, that felt kind of a bad mechanic. Having to guess when they needed food and figure out the timer and sit there, and not a very good system. So here, having feeders feed automatically is nice. Herbivores, they just eat the environment, so you just gotta do that. To keep the dinosaurs happy, there's actually a little bit more in terms of mechanics, which is interesting. You do have to go in and paint the ground, so give them the right environment. Before, they only cared about forests, whereas now there's a little bit more than just forests that they care about. You know, there's certain tree types they may prefer. And so that's been nice to see. Just having a little bit more variety overall, instead of just very basics like, hey, this needs water, food, trees, or grassland. That's it. So this guy here, as we're checking him out, we know he needs rocks and forest in his case. So again, we could click the button. Whatever's within this blue area is what the dinosaur has explored so far. And so we know that if I build in within the blue area, he'll be happy, right? He'll immediately see that. But anything outside the blue area, then you're kind of... it's outside of his view, and so you may or may not acknowledge it immediately. So until he explores this corner, then the forest won't go up. So nothing too crazy. I know he needs that rock base, so we can give him a bunch of rock here, keep him happy. One of the things to keep in mind is if the enclosures are too big, you do run into that problem where if they're too big and he doesn't tend to walk around much, whatever I build out here, and if say he always stays in this area, whatever I built out here, he'll lose sight of it eventually, and so his needs may start diminishing. So you might see forests. Yeah, you're seeing it right now. It's going down a little bit because he's not moving a whole lot. So, you know, you can't just build stuff at one end. You kind of have to spread it out a little bit. But as he's going back towards the trees, the rating's starting to go back up. But beyond that, if I needed to do... I can do a little bit of forest here, just as a precaution. And then the rock, I can also increase the radius and just paint more of the environment as rock. So that keeps him happy, because this particular dinosaur doesn't care about grass. He only cares about water, rock, and forest. Also fish. So yeah, storm warning. Well, that's gonna be fun. It might damage some stuff, but you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and save right here. And maybe I'll do super quick. I'll just jump into a yeah, we might just drop into a sandbox map just so you could see a little bit more of what there is. Sure. Leave the settings as is. So this will be like a true sandbox mode. Everything unlocked and limited money. Just kind of building a fantasy park. That's kind of the basic sandbox settings, which I find interesting, or the default ones per se. Yeah, I don't know. I wish it had a little bit more direction, a little bit more campaign. I know they added a DLC campaign, but that's not, you know, it's not part of the base game. So if they felt the base game needed that, they would have had it, right? And so for some reason they went down this direction, which I'm not crazy about it. Personally, I don't think it's bad per se, but again, it depends what you want. So we kind of have three different themes of buildings. So this is the campaign, you know, the US or government, whatever you want to call it. It's more traditional Jurassic Park, and I guess this is modern Jurassic Park. We'll give ourselves a park entrance here. Spin it around. It doesn't have to be at the edge of the map, but it works better that way. In terms of buildings, there's all sorts of other stuff we eventually have to build, so we can just quickly drop some of these buildings. We don't have to, I guess, but for the sake of this video, I'll do a bit of an example here. We'll build kind of a main artery style path here. Sure. What else we need? Staff center, so we can deal with staff stuff. We also need response facility in case dinosaurs escape or what have you. And I think that's all the... Oh yes, and a medical facility, so we can heal them if they get hurt and they get sick. We can have one of those here. And let's do... Alright, let's just go straight for the large power station. Put that up here somewhere. Okay. And since these are all... Let's just use luxury paths. We gotta hook up all these structures and buildings. Okay. And we'll do the same thing here. Yeah, it's... I don't know. It's not a bad game by any means. I'm just a little disappointed that they had such a drastic change in direction. They didn't really seem to... They had a huge change in direction. They didn't really seemingly figure out why, if that makes any sense. The big shift in terms of how they're dealing with this game just makes me wonder, like, why did you go this direction? You know, it feels like they kind of ran out of time, if anything. And they just kind of said, well, we've taken our previous title, we fixed a lot of the annoying, more tedious aspects of it, and then here's some new content, which is really cool, and then also, I don't know, we're done. You know, oh, you wanted story, well, here's a DLC pack, we'll do it after the fact. Okay, you know, not gonna complain too much, but it feels a little short-sighted, I guess. This is what I'm trying to get at. You know, for how much I liked the first one, the fact that it gave you a reason to keep playing it for quite a while with the campaign, and then you get in this one and it's this very short, like, oh, here's kind of a tutorial campaign thing, I don't know. Cool, we did a campaign, we checked it off. It's more of a tutorial, but that's fine, and then they kind of just end it there. I don't know. I'm just, I guess the best way to describe is I'm genuinely confused as to what this game's all about, because yeah, as I'm building up the sandbox here, while this is, yeah, all unlimited and whatever, you'll see very quickly that there's a bit less depth to it. You know, the first game wasn't very deep to begin with, and I find this one doesn't go any deeper. If anything, they just simplified a lot of the annoying bits. Now, since we're in the sandbox mode, I could afford to just be like, hey, give me all the positive stuff. I won't have any negative aspects here. I'll say, oh yeah, social, humble, sure. We'll make them tolerant. Combat, sure, we'll make them strong, and we'll make them offensive, and also really fit. We'll save and exit. We'll synthesize these dinosaurs. So it's a batch of 8 eggs, which is a little bit different than the previous games, and normally you would see the aspects here. I guess if you're doing not necessarily a sandbox run, you would have maybe more variance between them or things like that. So we'll release all these dinosaurs. Guest-wise, here's what I was talking about. You know, here's a large hotel. Here's a large amenity building. That's kind of all there is to it. I guess we'll build the hotel here. Actually, let's build it on the side here. That, so the hotel may or may not see some dinosaurs. We'll build a path. We'll do the amenities after. Let's oh, actually, before I release them, I'm gonna do a quick ranger post so we can keep an eye on these guys. We'll assign a team. Rangers can see what these dinosaurs want. Now we can release them. Yep, ranger team can't find a route because I didn't put a gate yet. Let's do that. Put a gate here. And then since guests would like to see dinosaurs as well, we can put in attractions. Oops, not an aviary.
Security specialist. Our challenges are many.
No, we could put a whoop.
Let's not waste any time.
If I didn't right click there.
There was a lot of
Put a viewing gallery there. We can put another viewing gallery here maybe.
into the park. It's an Archaeornithomimus. I think it puts some of those arguments to rest.
Yeah. I don't know, that's kind of what this game's all about. Yeah, like I said, it's a change in direction that personally don't agree much with, but hey, you know, it is what it is. If people like it, that's fine. As far as what I'm looking for out of these kinds of games, this is not it. And so, while I do appreciate the changes and all of that, kind of wish they did a little bit more with it. So, yeah, still forming territory, so they don't know everything yet. So I'm going to start doing some forests, because they're obviously not happy at the lack of forests. We'll do little batches of forest here and there. They need a little bit of water. Every dinosaur needs a little bit of water. Usually they don't need much. One of the things I noticed though is the more dinosaurs you have, which I mean it makes sense, but it is a neat mechanic, is the more you have within an enclosure. You know, when I only had 8 of them, for instance, they needed a certain amount of water, and then when 8 more came in, then suddenly I wasn't satisfying that need anymore, so they needed more water again. So I found that to be kind of interesting, the fact that I guess some of that water gets consumed in a sense, or is allocated to a certain amount of dinosaurs, and so when you have more, then the requirements go back up. Which, yeah. Maybe we'll do a small chunk here. Small patches there. Yeah, that's a bit more natural looking. So yeah. They all have other requirements that are not necessarily immediately obvious. I do like that the likes and dislikes are here. That makes a lot easier to know which dinosaurs you can put within the same enclosure. The first game, you kind of had to guess. Most herbivores were fine, but it wasn't too obvious. Here you could see in terms of population, yeah, 8 was kind of the minimum we needed for these guys to be happy. And in terms of cohabitation, we could probably put another dinosaur without them getting too upset. But anyways, we're over half an hour here. Overall thoughts? Yeah, this is very much one step forward, one step sideways, one step backwards, maybe 2 steps backwards, unfortunately. All the quality of life stuff, huge improvement, really appreciate that. on the flip side, yeah, the lack of just actual guided content is a real bummer. You know, the campaign is extremely short. It serves as a tutorial, and then after that, it's, I don't know, there's another story mode, which, whatever, it's kind of like the campaign, and then there's a challenge mode, which isn't too bad. You know, it's a time challenge to hit a 5-star park, but it's a bit less guided, right? It's just building a park to hit a certain number, which, again, not too bad. I might do it, but you don't have a huge sense of progression either, like the first game had. And I think that's the part where it kind of falls down a little bit. Is it bad? No, not necessarily. It's still a really good game, and it is available on Game Pass if you want to try it out. But at the same time, it's not the improvement I kind of wished it was. So anyways, with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next week with something else.